Thank you, Wendy, for that kind introduction. Thank you, Marginer, for letting us be here. Thank you for doing this, Marginer. This is just the most wonderful venue that we've got here. I can't think of a more beautiful place to relax on a summer. You can't hear me. I can't think of a more beautiful place to relax on a summer evening, join with neighbors and learn something and debate something and come to some ideas about how it is that we come as neighbors and take care of our resources and take care of each other, actually. What I want to do is sort of set the stage for what this whole big deal. Wait a minute, Wendy's talking to me.
I don't know anything about this one. I think maybe this one is
Is this one better?
No.
This one is on. Okay, is this one better? All right. All right. Marginer, did you hear me say thank you? Yeah. Okay. Okay. All right. So what I want to do is I want to sort of lay the foundation for what it is we're talking about when we say local control. You can always sort of wonder, is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? And why are we talking about it at all? Didn't we always have it? Don't we still have it? And over what areas do we care? Well, you know, just to go through the very basic civics lesson about government and authority, the way we set it up in this country, all power derives from the federal government and the Constitution. And the Constitution determines that the federal government has power, certain powers. And originally, the federal government had pretty much all the powers. And it will push down to the states those powers and abilities that make sense for states to do. States have income taxes, states do roads, states do public safety. They do all sorts of things that the federal government doesn't do. And then the states can push down to the counties more powers or other powers that will decide even closer in what you can do, how you spend money. And things like school systems are within really close local control of school districts and school boards. Counties have their own boards to make decisions about what happens in the county, how certain state programs are administered within county boundaries as is determined by the authority given to them by the state. And then even further, all the way down to towns, the towns have certain authority that is derived from the counties, from the state, and from the federal government. So there's always this pushing down of power from one level down to the next, and then down to the next, and down to the next. What is also true is that they can also take the power away. And there is always, always, always going to be that tension about should the county make the decision or the town? Should the county make the decision or do they have to do what the state tells them? Does the state have the power to say we're not going to do what the federal government says, or do you always have to obey with what the feds tell the states? And that is usually determined by looking at the Constitution and also at the laws that created the authority, and then how the laws determine that the responsibility would be delegated to lower and lower units of government. Now, the fact that that tension exists really is a good thing, because it'll go back and forth. I mean, there was a time when national security, or most of security in a non-wartime era, was handled by the states, by the colonies or the states. They had their own militias, which eventually turned into what we now call National Guard, which have a very distinct role to play that used to be very different than what it is today. Right now, the National Guard is a quasi national defense arm and is used much more than it ever used to be in going overseas and fighting or being engaged in warfare. And some people say, should they, shouldn't they? Well, you know, the feds get to decide what the states have the authority to do, and on and on and on. So the tension is always going to be there. And the desire is for, in my opinion, is for the most reasonable body should have the authority if it makes sense. The body that is closest to the ground should have the most pervasive authority if it makes sense. Now, a county isn't going to be able to decide if there's going to be an interstate, but a county should be able to decide where a routing is going to be of a major county road, and be able to make decisions about how services are dispensed to people for in public health. Decisions like that are could be left to the county based upon what the state says you must enact. What we have now is, if I were to kind of describe it, I would say that in our state, there is a desire to limit the role that the federal government plays, meaning we will resist the federal government telling the state what to do except for what we absolutely have to. So there's that interpretation. But then when it comes to the power that the state will delegate to local units of government, there is a reluctance to give that authority up. And in fact, what we are seeing is the state is rather systematically taking certain things that local units of government or local authorities used to be able to do, and they're taking that power back. And they're saying the state should decide this. So when we talk about shoreland zoning, that's what they did. They said, you used to be able to decide, we don't want you to decide anymore. We want to set the rules and you have to follow. And that's up to the citizens of the state of Wisconsin. If you like it that way, then they're not, I don't want to say they're not breaking any laws. They may be breaking some public trust, but they're using their authority as the state to take power away from. And it's neither right nor wrong, it's what you want that will determine if that is the right thing to do. Now, what I want to tell you, pardon me. This is a memo from the Legislative Reference Bureau and the Legislative Fiscal Bureau. In May of 2016, we asked what unfunded mandates and restrictions on local control have taken place in the 2011, 2012, and the 2013 and 2014 legislative sessions. And this is filled with unfunded mandates and removal or restrictions of local control. And I just want to tell you a couple of them that I have highlighted, because what it'll do is it'll illustrate that in some cases the effect is benign, or maybe it does make sense that the power is taken away. But in many more, it is left to the questioner, left to all of you to decide why did this happen? Why did they do this? Is this a better way of going about governing ourselves? The Working Lands Initiative repealed the authority to enact local farmland preservation conversion fees. The counties used to be able to assess fees on when agricultural preservation was reversed. Now they can't do that anymore. The local regulation of bird hunting preserves is gone. Pretty minor, doesn't seem that big of a deal. Public instruction, revenue limits are placed on in the first budget. The school safety expenditures were limited Transportation, limited, meaning you can't go more than what you've done before without going to referendum. School nurse compensation costs, fixed by the state, fixed by the state. The student information system, mandated, you must use the state's information. The levy limit for counties and municipalities. The local room tax revenues in premier resort areas was determined by the state in terms of how you can use that revenue. This is to me, one of the most indicative of what's going on. The repeal of the ability of local communities to form regional transit authorities. Now, let's talk about that a little bit. You've heard of a transit authority, which means that a group of communities can come together, and they used to be able to form an authority for the purposes of providing public transportation, and they would be able to obtain the ability to enact a small tax that would create public transportation or fund or subsidize and that ability, you are no longer allowed to do it. You're not allowed to do it. Now, some of you may like that, but how many people know of lake districts and what a lake district is? Lake districts have an authority, and that's an authority to collect revenue from people in the district in order to combat invasive species, to take care of blue-green algae. I fear that that's going to be next. Now see, when you form an authority, you have to pass a local referendum first. And everybody then has to say, yes, we will do it. And then the authority itself has to decide if they're going, all the people in the community have to decide if they are going to enact a tax or something so that they can control invasive species on their lakes or whatever it is. And in some cases, the Lake District is pretty much the only way to combat invasive species or other things that they can do in order to protect their lake management. How we bid local projects is mandated and totally controlled by the state. Local government reimbursement of outdoor advertising condemnation costs. I mean, why are they doing something like that? The Wisconsin Technical College system, levy limits. They cannot do anything to increase their levy. Prevailing wage passed or was repealed. Residency requirements are now illegal for police and fire. You cannot do that. A local authority does not have a local unit of government does not have the authority to say that we think it's best for our firefighters or our police to live within a certain area. They can't make them do that. Limiting municipal authority to enact development moratorium, that's gone. Prohibiting a local government from imposing a moratorium on eviction. If there's a policy and certain evictions are taking place and a local unit of government wants to impose a moratorium on evictions, they're not allowed to do that. They're not allowed to impose a moratorium on their own eviction law. And then there are pretty much, there's many things in the state and county of Milwaukee that the state is taking over. They took over the office of the comptroller. Of course, they have control of the school district of Milwaukee. Okay, and then there's shoreland zoning, which we'll talk about later. Preemption of local medical and family leave. Can't do anything better than what the state does. I don't know why, but you can't. You can't. Commercial and non-commercial radio broadcast facilities, mobile tower siting regulations, limiting the sale of certain food and beverages, having any involvement in real estate brokers, uniform standards for commercial erosion control, community service levy limits, utility relocation costs, limitation on payment in lieu of taxes for nonprofits now controlled by the state. I'm just trying to find some other. Oh, and they're getting involved in our education. They are requiring additional credits in math and science, more than what some school districts believe is in the best interest of their students. Local building code restrictions you can't do. Energy emergency and vehicle weight limits. Operation of agricultural vehicles on highways. Okay, it's just a bit of, that's about, I'm on page 4 of 9 pages. So that's just an example. Some of them not a big deal, some of them a big deal, some of them a scary indication of what could happen in the next session. And like I said, a lot of this is driven by the desire to have decisions made in Madison so that the entire state will be uniform. Now, you've heard me say before that uniformity is not equality. Just because it's the same depth or size or width, that does not mean it's the right depth or size or width in the entire state. But the state now is getting more and more in the direction of it's uniform and the state will set it and local units of government will not. So again, it's always a matter of, does this make sense? Is this the right place for the decision to be made, or isn't it? So now I want to pass the microphone on so that we can talk much more deeply into shoreland zoning, what it was, why and how it was changed, and what we may want to do about it. Wendy? And we'll both be kind of tag teaming it for questions after this.
Good. Thank you, Janet. Okay, our second speaker, we are pleased to present Bob Martini, Wisconsin DNR retired, to discuss how the new laws affect shoreland protection. Bob served 32 years at the DNR, leading the Wisconsin River cleanup, acid rain research, Central Sands groundwater work, and dam licensing removal work statewide. You may remember he came to a ICLRA meeting a couple years ago talking about the Rest Lake Dam. He won the DNR's Brogan Award in 1983 and was given the North American River Management Society Career Achievement Award in 2014. In retirement, he has served on about a dozen boards related to environmental protection and higher education. Please welcome Bob Martini.
Thank you for inviting me to your beautiful area of Wisconsin. I'm from Oneida County. I serve as president of Oneida County Lakes and Rivers Association. We're an association of associations, probably like yours. We have 25 to 40 lake associations that we represent and thousands of property owners who are members of those associations. And what we try to do is protect the waters of Oneida County. Our mission is to protect and enhance the waters of Oneida County. And we try to do this by educating, advocating, and collaborating. We try to make sure that people understand the detailed, intricate operations resulting in changes in law from Madison, for example, or from the county, and try to get people to understand that these changes in law affect you as a property owner, or you as a lake user, or you as someone who wants to make sure these lakes are pristine or in good shape for your grandchildren. So we try to make sure that education is important, but advocacy comes along with that. We advocate at the local level, which you all should, at your county zoning, county board meetings, town meetings, meetings where decisions are made that determine what you can do on a shoreline or what you can do in a lake and whether or not that lake is going to be protected. We also collaborate. We collaborate with a lot of groups, and you also should do this. People all over the north should be collaborating now. It's more important now than it was a year ago because local control has been removed. So we need to collaborate to try to restore it. We're collaborating with the River Alliance of Wisconsin, Wisconsin Lakes, other counties, the Wisconsin Shoreline Initiative, and if you don't know what that is, the leader is sitting right here, John Richter. He's doing a great job trying to bring together lake associations and like-minded people all over Wisconsin, really, to try to repeal the loss of local control to protect your local shorelines. If you don't know him already, get to know him because he's going to be knocking on your door to ask for help and to ask for support, and you should give it to him because it's really a good organization. I worked for DNR for 32 years, and since then, I've worked on a lot of organizations that protect the environment. I have never seen an assault on the environment like we've seen in the last 6 years. Protection of the environment used to be nonpartisan. There used to be stalwarts on both sides of the aisle helping to protect the environment. Everything from cleaning up with rivers for the paper mills, the municipalities, protecting lakes, doing all kinds of things to protect the environment. It's no longer nonpartisan. There is a serious assault on the basic protections that we have come to expect in Wisconsin over our history. And these protections are not just out of the blue. They came from scientific investigations dating back 50, 75 years. We had the first limnologists in America in northern Wisconsin, Trout Lake Station, Burge and Juday, University of Wisconsin, limnologists. They defined the science of limnology in America. And that start gave us the basis, the scientific basis for deciding what needs to be done to protect lakes. There was a coalition that's been operating for 40 years. The DNR, lake property owners, lake associations, University of Wisconsin Extension, and a whole series of local units of government collaborated. Now, all of that has changed. These local controls that have been evolved over the past 40 years cannot be used anymore. There now is a state law that says that you can't be any less stringent than state law, and you can't be any more stringent than state law to protect shorelines. That means you have to do exactly what's in the state code. The state code is NR 115. It's been on the books since the 1960s. It was never designed to be a detailed code for a county like Iron or Oneida or Vilas, where we have thousands of lakes. It was designed to be a basic approach that counties could take that don't have any lakes or have very few, but need basic shoreline protection. The idea behind NR 115 was that counties would innovate. Counties would decide what they need for various waters in their county. We have 1,130 lakes in Oneida County, 800 and some rivers and streams. Each one of them is different. It's like people, they're all different. They all have different sources of water. They all have different chemistry. They all have different biological characteristics. And these characteristics make a lake either more vulnerable or less vulnerable to pollution. If you don't take that into account in designing your county code, which protects shorelines, then you're not going to protect that lake. I'll give you an example. Hat Rapids Flowage in Oneida County routinely accepts hundreds of pounds of waste from the Rhinelander paper mill and the city of Rhinelander every day, and still meets water quality standards because it's on the biggest river in the state, the Wisconsin River. It's diluted. There's assimilative capacity. But other small streams, little trout streams that you can step across, couldn't tolerate even 1 pound of waste or pollution per year before it would be adversely affected. That's a drastic difference in susceptibility to human changes, human pollution sources. And if you don't take into account those changes in bodies of water, you can't adequately design a protection system that will maintain the water quality so that you can use the water, so that fish will thrive, so that your grandchildren will have beautiful waters like we've had. This is really important. This is science-based management. It's a principle that Wisconsin has advanced nationwide for almost 100 years. We have had some of the best scientific management individuals in Wisconsin, and some of them are world-renowned. Aldo Leopold, for example. These people have worked out the intricacies of scientific management of natural resources, especially related to shorelines, over many decades. And all of this was overturned when the legislature decided that counties couldn't have the authority to control and protect their own waters. Some counties, 20 counties in northern Wisconsin, chose to be more stringent than state law. Why did they do that? Because they had more to protect. These were the counties where all the lakes occur. Counties like Iron, for example. They innovated many really important innovations that are not found in the state law. Things like buffer strips to try to protect the lakes, mitigation, allowing mitigation to occur so that you can do whatever you want to construct on your property, provided that you do mitigation to prevent the damage from occurring. All sorts of innovations are included in those codes that have been enforced for 15 years. 15 years of experience. Most of these codes have been accepted by the public in these counties. Very few have been challenged in legal actions. They've been accepted because people understand the importance of using science to protect lakes instead of politics to protect lakes. It's long-term thinking as opposed to short-term thinking. So it's really important. And that's one of the major casualties in the bills that have come through in the last 6 years, is the minimization of science as a background for protecting natural resources. Well, what can we do? A lot of people say, well, you know, we can't do anything. We can't change the legislature. You know, they've done it to us. Well, I think there are some things that we can do. Oneida County Lakes and Rivers had a conference, 6 counties, back in June, and we asked each county, what are you doing now that you don't have the authority to protect your lakes the way you want to? What are you doing, and what could you do, and what should counties do? What should individuals do to protect their own resources? We've all got major investments in these waters. Not only do you have, if you're a property owner, not only do you have a house that has a lot of value that you need to protect, but our economy is directly related to the health of these waters. We did some research in Oneida County to determine just exactly how important was the assessed valuation of shorelines on lakes in Oneida County. We found that most of the towns in Oneida County had more than 50% of their assessed valuation coming from shorelines. The town of Three Lakes had 93% of their assessed valuation coming from shoreline properties. The University of Wisconsin real estate department a few years ago, and they're one of the best in the nation, they're rated #1 in graduate real estate departments in the state, or in the nation. They did a study of 1,000 transactions in Vilas and Oneida counties on lakes to determine what would the economic impact be if you had water quality problems or invasive species, or if you were so developed that the habitat around the lake was adversely affected and you didn't have adequate wildlife and fish. And what they determined from those over 1,000 transactions that occurred in those 2 counties was that a 15 to 17% drop in your property's value would occur if one of those 3 things happened: water quality problems, invasive species, or so much development that habitat was affected. Well, there isn't a taxing authority in northern Wisconsin that can sustain a 15 to 17% drop in assessed valuations, especially those townships that have well over half of their assessed valuation coming from shoreline assessments. It's not only the right thing to do, it's not only good for the environment, for fish and wildlife, it's not only good for tourism, it's the economic imperative for northern Wisconsin to protect our lakes. It's literally the goose that laid the golden egg in most of the communities of northern Wisconsin. Oneida County, tourism numbers, $215 million of tourism spending in Oneida County in 2015, according to the State Division of Tourism. Most of that was related directly to lakes